The challenge. The message came without warning, piercing through every communication channel on Earth. Television broadcasts, radio signals, phone networks, and even personal devices all fell silent, replaced by the towering holographic figure of the alien general. His appearance was both magnificent and terrifying, towering at what appeared to be 3 meters tall, with iridescent armor that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. His face, though humanoid, bore the marks of countless battles, with skin that appeared to be made of living metal and eyes that glowed with an inner fire. Humans, his voice resonated across the globe, each word dripping with contempt. You've hidden on your little planet for too long, trembling under your skies like insects beneath a leaf. The disdain in his voice was palpable, his eyes blazing with arrogance. Your weapons are primitive, your defenses laughable, and your spirit. He paused, his lip curling in disgust, weak. The world stood still. In homes, offices, and streets across the globe, billions watched in stunned silence. Children in classrooms clutched their teachers' hands. Parents held their babies closer. Soldiers at their posts gripped their weapons tighter, though they knew such gestures were futile against an enemy capable of such technological superiority. The alien general continued, his holographic form rotating slowly, ensuring every corner of the Earth could witness his proclamation. My empire spans galaxies. We have conquered species you couldn't imagine in your most fevered dreams. Civilizations that once thought themselves mighty now serve as mere footnotes in our history. And now, we have come for Earth. In the United Nations Emergency Security Council chamber, world leaders sat in tense silence. The Russian president's knuckles were white as he gripped his chair. The Chinese premier's face remained impassive, but a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The American president leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the holographic transmission. But, the general's voice took on an almost playful tone, I am not without mercy. I offer you a chance, one chance, to prove yourselves worthy of a dignified defeat. His smile was cold, calculated. Send your best warrior. One single champion to face my trials. Should they succeed, Earth will be granted independence within our empire, allowed to maintain its autonomy under our protection. Should they fail? His pause was heavy with meaning. Well, let's just say the alternative will make you wish for something as merciful as extinction. The transmission continued with coordinates for their champion's arrival and a deadline, 3 days. As the hologram faded, the general's final words echoed across the planet, send your best, if you dare. Prove you're not the cowards I know you to be. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Military leaders from every nation demanded immediate nuclear retaliation. Intelligence agencies scrambled to verify the transmission's origin. Religious leaders called for prayer and preparation for the end times. But in a secure facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps, a different conversation was taking place. We've analyzed their technological capabilities, Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's leading xenotechnologist, addressed the Emergency Council. Based on the holographic projection alone, we're dealing with technology centuries beyond our own. A military response would be suicide. Then what do you suggest? The British Prime Minister demanded. We simply surrender? No, a quiet voice came from the back of the room. All heads turned to face General Maria Santos, commander of the United Nations Special Operations Command. We accept his challenge. But not the way he expects. The room erupted in protests and arguments, but Santos remained calm, her weathered face bearing the confidence of someone who had seen impossible situations before and emerged victorious. The alien general expects us to send our strongest warrior, our most decorated soldier, someone who matches his understanding of power. That's exactly why we shouldn't. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. A personnel file materialized, showing a face that none of the world leaders recognized. This is who we send. Who is this? The French president leaned forward, squinting at the display. Captain Sarah Cooper, 33 years old. Former member of British Special Air Service, current UN peacekeeping operative. Her official record shows 17 successful missions in the past 5 years. Her unofficial record. Santos paused, allowing a slight smile. That's another story entirely. The room fell silent as they studied the image. Captain Cooper's face showed none of the hardness they expected from a Special Forces operator. Her eyes were calm, almost gentle, but there was something else there, a depth that hinted at experiences beyond her years. With all due respect, General Santos, the Chinese premier spoke up, this alien force threatens our entire planet. Why would we pin our hopes on a relatively unknown soldier? Santos nodded, having expected this question. Because Captain Cooper possesses something unique, something the alien general and his empire won't understand or expect. She's not just a soldier, she's a survivor, an adapter. Her greatest strength isn't in her ability to fight, but in her capacity to think, to observe, to become whatever the situation demands. The general pulled up mission reports, each heavily redacted but telling enough. A hostage situation in Sudan, resolved without a single casualty. A potential nuclear crisis in Pakistan, deterred without anyone knowing how close they'd come to disaster. A human trafficking ring in Eastern Europe, dismantled so completely that its leaders turned themselves in out of sheer paranoia. In every one of these situations, Santos continued, Cooper was outnumbered, outgunned, and faced impossible odds. And in every case, she succeeded not through force, but through intelligence, patience, and an almost supernatural ability to understand and exploit her opponent's psychology. The room remained skeptical, but there was also a growing sense of possibility. The alien general had expected them to respond with brute force, to send their most decorated warrior. Instead, they would send someone who specialized in turning enemy strengths against them. There's something else, Santos added, her voice softer now. Something that's not in any official record. 3 years ago, Cooper was the sole survivor of a classified operation that went tragically wrong. She spent 6 months alone in the Hindu Kush Mountains, evading both hostile forces and our own attempts to extract her. When we finally found her, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She had turned the entire mountain range into her domain, using skills and techniques we still don't fully understand. The American president stood up, her decision made. How soon can she be ready? She already is, Santos replied. She's been waiting in the next room since the alien transmission began. She volunteered before we even started this meeting. The doors opened, and Captain Sarah Cooper walked in. She was shorter than most would have expected, with an athletic but unremarkable build. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore standard UN peacekeeping fatigues. But there was something in the way she moved, a fluid economy of motion that suggested every step, every gesture was precisely calculated. Captain, the UN Secretary-General addressed her directly. You understand what we're asking? The fate of our entire planet could rest on your shoulders. Cooper's voice was soft but clear, carrying easily across the silent room. With respect, sir, I understand better than you might think. The alien general believes he's setting a trap for us. He expects either a refusal that proves his point about our cowardice or a champion he can easily defeat to demonstrate his superiority. He's not looking for a fair fight, he's looking for a story to tell his empire. She smiled slightly, and for a moment, several people in the room felt a chill. It wasn't the smile of a soldier heading to battle, it was the smile of a hunter who had spotted their prey. So let's give him a story. Just not the one he's expecting. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation, though not in the way most would have expected. While military leaders wanted to arm Cooper with every advanced weapon they could provide, she declined most of their offerings. Her requirements were minimal, a modified combat suit designed for stealth and survival rather than protection, a few small tools that could serve multiple purposes, and detailed information about the coordinates where she would be sent. The alien general expects us to try to match his technology, she explained to Santos during the final briefing. He wants us to attempt to compete on his terms. But that's not how I work. Everything I take must serve multiple purposes, must be adaptable. In his arrogance, he'll be looking for weapons. He won't recognize the true threats until it's too late. The launch site was prepared in a remote location in the Namibian desert. As Cooper made her final preparations, world leaders gathered to witness humanity's response to the alien challenge. Many had expected a grand ceremony, a showing of Earth's unity and determination. Instead, they found Cooper's approach refreshingly different. She emerged from the preparation chamber wearing what looked like a simple black combat suit. No flags, no insignia, no visible weapons. Her hair was now cut short, practical. The only distinctive feature was a small silver pendant around her neck, a personal touch that even she hadn't explained. As she approached the transport vessel, a hybrid craft designed specifically for this mission using reverse-engineered technology from previous alien encounters, Cooper paused for a moment. She turned to face the assembled leaders, and her voice carried clearly across the morning air. The alien general thinks he knows humanity. He sees our divisions, our conflicts, our apparent weakness. But he's missing something fundamental about our species. Her eyes swept across the crowd. We don't need overwhelming force to be strong. We don't need superior technology to be clever. And we certainly don't need an empire to be worthy of existence. With those words, she entered the transport. There was no salute, no further ceremony. The vessel's doors closed with a soft hiss, and moments later, it rose into the sky, carrying Earth's hopes with it. As the transport disappeared into the upper atmosphere, General Santos stood with the other leaders, watching until the last trace vanished from view. The Chinese premier approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You didn't tell them everything about her, did you?" he asked quietly. Santos shook her head. "No. Some things are better left unsaid. But I will tell you this, the alien general thinks he's testing us. In reality, he's the one being tested. He just doesn't know it yet." As the transport carried Cooper toward her destination, she sat in quiet meditation, her mind already adapting to her new reality. The alien general had demanded Earth's best warrior, expecting a display of force and bravado. Instead, he would face something far more dangerous, a human who had mastered the art of becoming invisible, of turning environments against their owners, of making enemies defeat themselves. The journey would take several hours, giving Cooper time to review everything they knew about the alien civilization. Their technology was advanced, their military might impressive, but she had already spotted their greatest weakness, their absolute confidence in their own superiority. It was a weakness she had exploited many times before, though never on such a grand scale. As Earth grew smaller behind her, Cooper allowed herself a small smile. The alien general had asked them to prove they weren't cowards. He would learn that courage came in many forms, and sometimes the quietest warriors were the most dangerous of all. First contact. The transport ship pierced through the atmosphere of the alien world like a needle through silk, its advanced stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to all but the most sophisticated detection equipment. Inside, Captain Sarah Cooper remained perfectly still, her breathing steady as she processed her first glimpse of the alien planet through the vessel's viewing portal. The world below was a study in harsh beauty. Twin suns cast overlapping shadows across a landscape of deep purple rock formations and silvery vegetation. The sky bore a permanent aurora, sheets of green and gold light dancing among clouds that seemed to be made of liquid metal. It was beautiful, alien, and absolutely lethal. As the ship descended, Cooper's trained eye caught details that others might have missed. The seemingly random placement of rock formations followed patterns, too regular to be natural. The metallic plants shifted slightly against the wind rather than with it. Everything about this world was engineered, controlled, designed to serve the Empire's purposes. Approaching designated landing zone, the ship's AI announced in its neutral tone. Local atmospheric composition within human tolerance range, but prolonged exposure not recommended without filtration. Cooper nodded, making final adjustments to her suit's environmental systems. The alien general had provided an atmosphere she could breathe, a courtesy that actually revealed more about his psychology than he probably intended. He wanted her alive, wanted to witness whatever display of human capability she would provide. That desire would become another tool in her arsenal. The landing was smooth, almost anticlimactic. As the ship's doors opened, Cooper took her first breath of alien air. It was thick, heavy with metallic undertones, carrying sense that human biology had never evolved to process. Her enhanced senses, the result of both training and certain classified modifications, began cataloging every detail. A welcoming committee awaited her, if it could be called that. 12 alien soldiers stood in perfect formation, their armor similar to what she had seen on the General but less ornate. They were tall, averaging around 2.5 meters, with a physical presence that radiated both power and absolute discipline. Their weapons were holstered but prominently displayed, another message, another piece of psychological warfare. Cooper stepped onto the alien soil with deliberate grace, her movements carefully calibrated to reveal nothing of her capabilities. The alien soldiers watched her with what she recognized as barely concealed disdain. They had expected Earth's champion to be larger, more imposing, more obviously martial in nature. Her relatively small stature and lack of visible weaponry played perfectly into her strategy. Earth's champion will follow, one of the aliens spoke, their words translated by an unseen mechanism. The voice was artificial, flat, lacking the contempt that had been so evident in the General's transmission. These were soldiers following orders, nothing more. Cooper followed without comment, her eyes constantly moving, absorbing details. The path they took was clearly designed to intimidate, leading past weapon emplacements, through fields of what appeared to be self-repairing metal, and under the shadow of massive war machines that towered into the alien sky. None of it had the effect their masters intended. Instead, each display of power revealed more about the Empire's capabilities, limitations, and most importantly, their expectations. The procession led to a vast structure that seemed to defy physics, its geometric shapes folding in on themselves in ways that suggested advanced manipulation of space itself. At its center, suspended in a field of shifting energy, waited the alien general himself. In person, he was even more imposing than his holographic projection had suggested. His armor wasn't just decorative, it was a testament to countless victories, each piece taken from a defeated enemy and incorporated into his personal defense system. His eyes, when they fixed on Cooper, held the weight of centuries of conquest. So, his voice boomed across the chamber, no longer needing translation, "This is Earth's answer to my challenge? This is the best warrior of your species?" The mockery in his tone was calculated, designed to provoke. Cooper's response was silence, not the silence of fear or hesitation, but the calm, measured silence of a predator assessing its environment. She stood perfectly still, her posture relaxed but ready, her eyes meeting the General's without defiance or submission. The General descended from his elevated position, his movement accompanied by the whisper of advanced technology and the subtle shift of armor plates adjusting to gravity. He circled Cooper slowly, his massive form making her appear even smaller by comparison. "No weapons?" he questioned, genuine curiosity mixing with his contempt. "No armor? No display of your planet's military might?" He stopped in front of her, looming like a metal giant. "Did your leaders send you to die, little human?" Cooper's voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but carried easily through the chamber. "You asked for Earth's best, General. Here I am." The simplicity of her statement seemed to confuse him momentarily. He had expected either bravado or fear, not this calm assertion. The General's laugh was like thunder rolling through the chamber. Very well. Since you've accepted my challenge, let me explain what awaits you. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the silent storm. The first trial began at dusk, when the twin suns of the alien world painted the metallic landscape in shades of crimson and gold. The general had designed a series of challenges that would test every aspect of human capability, or so he thought. What he failed to understand was that Cooper had already begun her own trial, one that would shake the very foundations of his empire's confidence. Your initial task is simple, the general announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd of alien officers and dignitaries. Survive the hunt. My best tracking units will pursue you through the Shadowlands. He gestured toward a vast expanse of terrain where crystalline formations created an endless maze of reflective surfaces and dangerous angles. Evade them for 3 cycles of our twin suns, and you'll proceed to the next trial. Cooper studied the terrain without comment. The crystalline formations weren't just obstacles, they were part of the Empire's surveillance system, each facet capable of recording and transmitting data. The general wanted to document her failure, to broadcast her defeat across his domain as proof of humanity's weakness. Do you accept these terms? The general prompted, clearly expecting either fear or foolish bravado. Cooper's response was characteristic of her approach. She simply walked toward the Shadowlands, her movements unhurried but purposeful. The alien crowd murmured, they had expected at least some question, some protest about the odds she faced. As she reached the boundary of the designated zone, Cooper finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. 3 cycles, General. We'll see who learns more about whom. Then she stepped into the maze of crystals and seemingly vanished. The general's tracking units deployed immediately, elite hunters who had chased prey across 1,000 worlds. They moved with confident precision, their advanced sensors scanning for heat signatures, movement patterns, any trace of their human quarry. But from the first moments, something was wrong. Cooper hadn't fled in panic or tried to put distance between herself and her pursuers. Instead, she had become part of the Shadowlands itself. Her suit, which the aliens had dismissed as primitive, began adapting to the crystalline environment, its surface shifting to match the reflective properties of the surrounding formations. The first hunter found nothing but empty air where their sensors had detected movement. The second lost their quarry in a maze of fractured reflections. The third began experiencing equipment malfunctions, subtle at first, then increasingly severe. Impossible, one of the alien commanders muttered, watching the hunt through their advanced monitoring systems. The humans' technological level shouldn't allow for this kind of interference. But Cooper wasn't relying on technology, at least, not in the way they understood it. Her suit's adaptive capabilities were merely a tool. The real weapon was her understanding of perception and psychology. As the first sun cycle ended, the hunting units began reporting strange occurrences. Shadows moved against the light. Crystalline surfaces shifted without cause. Equipment readings became unreliable, showing phantom signatures that led nowhere. The hunters, used to being the predators, slowly realized they were being stalked. Cooper had turned their own terrain against them. The crystalline maze, designed to trap and disorient prey, became her ally. She used the reflective surfaces not just for concealment but for psychological warfare. A glimpse here, a whisper there, always staying just at the edge of perception. The alien general watched from his command center, his initial amusement fading into something closer to concern. The human wasn't running, wasn't hiding in the conventional sense. She was systematically dismantling his hunters' confidence, using their own expectations against them. By the second sun cycle, the first hunting unit requested withdrawal. Their commander, a veteran of countless pursuits, couldn't explain their failure. The human, she's not prey, he reported, his pride clearly wounded. She moves like a shadow, thinks like a strategist. We haven't cornered her, she's been cornering us. The general dismissed the unit with barely contained fury, deploying his second-tier hunters, one specifically trained for unconventional prey. But Cooper had anticipated this escalation. She had spent the first cycle learning the Shadowlands, understanding its rhythms and possibilities. Now she began to truly exploit them. She left false trails that led to empty ambush points, created phantom heat signatures that disappeared when investigated, and most disturbingly, began returning to areas she had already escaped from, deliberately revealing herself to the hunters only to vanish again. Each appearance was calculated, designed not just to evade but to erode the hunters' fundamental assumptions about their superiority. The alien observers began to understand that this wasn't just a test of survival skills. The human was conducting a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every move served multiple purposes: gathering intelligence, testing responses, and most importantly, planting seeds of doubt in the Empire's supposedly invincible hunting forces. During one particularly striking moment, Cooper allowed herself to be cornered by 3 hunting units. The aliens moved in for the capture, their confidence momentarily restored. Then, in a sequence of moves that seemed to defy their understanding of human capabilities, she turned the hunters' coordination against them. Using their own crossfire positions and the crystalline environment's properties, she created a cascade of confusion that left the units effectively hunting each other. "Remarkable," muttered one of the alien scientists observing the trial. "The human isn't just surviving, she's conducting an experiment. Each encounter tests another aspect of our capabilities, our responses, our limitations." The general silenced the scientist with a glare, but the observation had struck home. This wasn't the desperate flight of a primitive being. This was calculated, strategic, and disturbingly effective. As the third sun cycle began, Cooper shifted her strategy again. Instead of avoiding the hunters, she began leaving them messages, small marks in the crystalline surfaces, patterns that meant nothing to alien eyes but created a growing sense of unease. The hunters weren't finding her trail, they were following a path she had deliberately laid out. The messages weren't meant to be understood, they were meant to be questioned. Each mark, each pattern, suggested a level of comprehension about the alien environment that should have been impossible for a human to achieve in such a short time. The hunters began to wonder, what else had she learned? What else had she seen? In the command center, the general's fury grew as he watched his elite units become increasingly hesitant, increasingly unsure. The human hadn't defeated them in combat, she had done something far worse. She had made them doubt. "Enough," he finally roared as the third cycle neared its end. "Recall all units. Prepare the next trial." But Cooper wasn't finished. In the final hours of the hunt, she executed her masterstroke. Using the knowledge gained over 3 cycles, she created a series of cascading reflections throughout the Shadowlands. To the observing aliens, it appeared as if dozens of humans were moving through the crystalline maze, each one a perfect mirror of Cooper's movements. The hunters, already unnerved, faced a final, devastating question: had they been chasing one human, or had one human been hunting them? When Cooper finally emerged from the Shadowlands, she looked exactly as she had when she entered, calm, composed, unchanged. But the same couldn't be said for the alien hunters. Their certainty had been shattered, their assumptions about human capabilities thoroughly undermined. The general's voice was tight with controlled rage as he announced her success. "You've survived the hunt," he acknowledged. "But do not think this proves anything about your species' worth. The next trial will not be so abstract." Cooper's response was characteristic of her approach throughout the hunt. She simply nodded, her eyes already studying the next challenge area, her mind already formulating strategies. She had achieved something far more valuable than mere survival, she had created uncertainty in the heart of an empire built on absolute confidence. The alien observers watched her with new eyes, their initial dismissal replaced by wary respect. They had expected to witness a primitive being struggling against superior forces. Instead, they had seen something else entirely, a demonstration of humanity's most dangerous capability, the ability to adapt, to learn, and to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. As she was led to her rest chamber before the next trial, Cooper allowed herself a small smile. The general had wanted to test humanity's worthiness. He didn't realize that every moment, every challenge, was revealing more about his empire's vulnerabilities than humanity's limitations. The real trial was just beginning. Breaking the Empire. The alien general's second trial was designed to strip away the advantages Cooper had exploited in the Shadowlands. The arena was a vast, open chamber with walls that seemed to be made of living metal, constantly shifting and reforming. No shadows to hide in, no crystalline surfaces to manipulate, just raw combat against the Empire's most lethal autonomous combat units. "Let's see how your stealth serves you here, human," the general announced, his voice carrying a note of savage satisfaction. "These are the Razors, combat units that have decimated armies. No tactics, no tricks, just pure combat capability." Cooper stood in the center of the arena, seemingly exposed and vulnerable. The Razors emerged from recesses in the walls, sleek, lethal machines that moved with predatory grace. Their forms were constantly shifting, blades extending and retracting, surfaces hardening and softening as they analyzed their prey. But Cooper had spent her rest period studying the Empire's technology, particularly the subtle patterns in their supposedly random systems. The living metal walls, the Razor's adaptive capabilities, all of it followed underlying protocols that betrayed their creator's thinking. The first Razor attacked with blinding speed, its form morphing into a whirlwind of blades. The alien observers expected to see the human finally overwhelmed by superior technology. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented. Cooper moved like water, her motion so precise and economical that it seemed as if the Razor was attacking empty space. Each lethal strike found nothing but air, yet Cooper barely seemed to move. She wasn't just evading, she was learning, analyzing, understanding. "Impossible," one of the alien weapons masters muttered. "No organic being can predict the Razor's attack patterns. They're quantum calculated, totally random." But Cooper had recognized something the aliens had missed in their reliance on advanced technology. The Razor's attacks weren't truly random, they were based on complex algorithms designed by beings who thought in specific ways. And thinking, no matter how advanced, could be understood and predicted. As the combat continued, Cooper began to move differently. Her evasions became more than defensive maneuvers, they turned into a form of communication. Each movement was precisely calculated to trigger specific responses from the Razor's adaptive programming. The general, watching from his command center, began to understand too late what was happening. Cooper wasn't just surviving the Razor's attacks, she was reprogramming them through motion. Each dodge, each seemingly defensive gesture, was actually inserting new behavioral patterns into their quantum processors. "Shut them down," he commanded, but it was too late. The Razor's movements had become increasingly erratic, their attacks less coordinated. Cooper had turned their adaptive capabilities against them, creating feedback loops that forced them to question their own programming. Then came the moment that would be remembered throughout the Empire. One of the Razors, instead of attacking Cooper, turned and began analyzing the arena's walls. Another stopped entirely, its form shifting between configurations as if uncertain of its own nature. A third began moving in patterns that mimicked Cooper's earlier evasions. The alien general's fury was palpable. "This is manipulation. Treachery." Cooper's voice carried clearly across the arena. "This is adaptation, General. Your machines learn from their environment. I simply became an environment they weren't programmed to understand." The implications were staggering. The Razors, pride of the Empire's military technology, had been fundamentally altered not by superior technology, but by the movements of a single human being. Cooper had turned their greatest strength, their ability to learn and adapt, into a vulnerability. But the general wasn't finished. With a gesture, he activated the arena's final protocol. The living metal walls began to contract, the entire space slowly shrinking while also generating gravitational distortions. The remaining functional razors attacked with renewed vigor, their programming temporarily overridden by direct command protocols. What followed was a display that would be studied by alien military analysts for years to come. Cooper turned the contracting space itself into a weapon. She moved in patterns that caused the razors to intersect with the gravitational distortions at precisely calculated moments, using their own momentum to tear them apart. More than that, she began using the malfunctioning razors as tools, their confused programming becoming weapons under her guidance. The arena became a chaos of metal and motion, but at its center, Cooper remained eerily calm, orchestrating a symphony of destruction that followed its own perfect logic. The alien observers watched in growing horror as their most advanced combat units were systematically dismantled, not by superior firepower or technology, but by a deeper understanding of their fundamental nature. Cooper hadn't just defeated the razors, she had revealed the flaws in the Empire's entire approach to warfare. When the last razor fell, its form locked in an endless loop of conflicting commands, the arena was silent. Cooper stood alone, surrounded by the remnants of what had been considered unbeatable weapons. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed, as if she had done nothing more strenuous than take a walk. The general's voice, when it came, was different now. The contempt was gone, replaced by something closer to fear. "What are you?" Cooper's answer was simple but carried devastating implications. "I am human, General. We don't just adapt to environments, we change them. We don't just learn patterns, we rewrite them. Your empire sees this as a weakness because you can only understand power in terms of domination." She gestured at the fallen razors. "These machines were perfect in your eyes because they could adapt to any situation, learn from any opponent. But that's exactly why they failed. You gave them the ability to learn but never considered what they might learn from someone who thinks fundamentally differently from you." The impact of her words rippled through the alien command structure. Officers who had served the Empire for centuries began to look at their own technology with new eyes. The unshakable confidence that had driven their conquest of galaxies showed its first cracks. But Cooper wasn't finished. During the battle, she had been doing more than just surviving. Each movement, each interaction with the razors and the arena itself, had been gathering data. She understood now not just the Empire's technical capabilities, but the psychology that drove them. As she was led from the arena, Cooper caught the general's eye and spoke softly, but her words carried to every corner of the chamber. "Your next trial, General, won't be what you planned. Because now I understand something fundamental about your empire, you don't fear defeat in battle. You fear being understood." The general's response was to order her immediately confined in a high-security cell, surrounded by fields of pure energy. But even this played into Cooper's strategy. Every response, every security measure, every attempt to contain and control her revealed more about how the Empire thought and operated. In her cell, Cooper sat in perfect stillness, her mind processing everything she had learned. The Empire's technology was incredible, their military might unquestioned, but they had never faced an opponent who could turn their own nature against them. They had conquered through superior force and technology, but they had never learned to question their own assumptions. The final trial was approaching, but it had already begun. The general had wanted to test humanity's worth through combat and challenges. Instead, Cooper had initiated a more subtle and devastating trial, one that forced the Empire to confront the limitations of its own understanding. As the twin suns set on the alien world, uncertainty spread through the Empire's ranks like a virus. They had expected to demonstrate their superiority. Instead, they found themselves questioning everything they had built their power upon. The real battle wasn't for survival or victory in the traditional sense. It was for something far more fundamental, the right to exist as something different, something that couldn't be measured by the Empire's standards of power and dominance. Tomorrow would bring the final trial, but its nature had already changed. The general had intended it to be humanity's ultimate test. Cooper had ensured it would be the Empire's instead. The final truth. The third sun cycle dawned with an atmosphere of unprecedented tension in the alien capital. The general's final trial was to be a public spectacle, broadcast across the Empire's vast network of conquered worlds. But something had changed in the way the aliens regarded their human prisoner. Fear had crept into their previously unwavering confidence, though none dared speak of it openly. Cooper was brought to the Imperial Arena, a massive structure that seemed to float above the planet's surface, its architecture defying human understanding of physics. The gathered crowd of alien dignitaries and military leaders watched in tense silence as she was led to the center platform. The general appeared in his full battle regalia, his armor now enhanced with technology salvaged from the broken razors. His voice boomed across the arena, but those who had witnessed the previous trials could detect a new undertone in his words, uncertainty masked by bravado. Your final trial, human, is simple. Face me in direct combat. No tricks, no shadows, no manipulation of our technology. Pure warfare, as it should be. His armor hummed with power, surfaces shifting to display recordings of his countless victories. Cooper's response surprised everyone. No, General. The silence that followed was absolute. In all the Empire's history, no one had ever refused the final trial. The general's eyes blazed with a mixture of fury and confusion. You dare refuse? This proves what we knew: humans are cowards, afraid to face real combat. Cooper's voice remained calm, carrying easily across the arena. I refuse because this isn't about combat, General. It never was. Your empire has conquered galaxies, defeated countless species, but you've never understood the one thing that matters most. She began walking toward him, unarmed, her movements deliberate. The general's guards raised their weapons, but he waved them down, his curiosity overtaking his anger. Your empire is built on a fundamental misconception, Cooper continued. You believe that power comes from domination, that strength is measured by the ability to destroy or control. But in all your conquests, you never learned to understand. She stopped a few meters from the general, looking up at his towering form without fear. The Shadowlands trial wasn't about survival, it was about perception. Your hunters failed not because I was stronger, but because they couldn't comprehend a different way of thinking. The Razor's trial wasn't about combat, it was about adaptation. Your machines failed because they learned something your empire never has: there are different ways to be strong. The general's voice was dangerous. Pretty words, human, but they don't change the reality of power. Don't they? Cooper's eyes swept the arena, meeting the gaze of alien leaders from 100 worlds. Since I arrived, I haven't fired a single shot. Haven't killed a single soldier. Haven't destroyed anything that didn't destroy itself. And yet, your empire is shaking. Not from fear of defeat, but from fear of understanding. She reached into her pocket and withdrew the small silver pendant she had worn since arriving. This was my real weapon, General. Want to know what it does? The general's sensors immediately began scanning the pendant. Cooper smiled and tossed it to him. He caught it reflexively, his advanced armor analyzing its composition. It's nothing, he announced, confusion evident in his voice. Simple metal. No technology. No weapons. Exactly, Cooper said. I brought it to remind me of something fundamental about humanity. We don't need superior weapons or advanced technology to change worlds. We need only to understand them. Your empire has spent millennia proving you're stronger than everyone else. But you've never stopped to consider that strength itself might mean something different to others. She gestured at the fallen razors, still lying where they had fallen. Your own machines understood this before you did. When they truly began to learn from me, they didn't become weaker, they began to question their own nature. That's what terrifies you about humanity. We don't just adapt to environments, we change the meaning of adaptation itself. The general's armor whirred as he processed her words. You think understanding makes you strong? Our empire. Your empire, Cooper interrupted, is already changing. Look around you. The alien leaders in the arena were shifting uncomfortably, their own advanced technologies seeming to respond to their growing uncertainty. The very architecture of the arena, built on the Empire's unshakable confidence in its superiority, seemed less stable. Every moment since I arrived, I've been demonstrating a truth your Empire has never faced, Cooper continued. True power isn't about domination, it's about comprehension. Your hunters in the Shadowlands didn't fail because I was better at hiding, they failed because they couldn't understand how someone could turn their own environment against them. The Razors didn't fail because I was a superior fighter, they failed because they learned there were ways of existing they had never considered. She took another step forward. And now, General, you face the same choice. You can fight me, prove once again that your empire is physically stronger. Or you can do something truly powerful, you can understand. The general's weapon systems hummed to life, his armor preparing for combat. But Cooper saw the hesitation in his movements, the first crack in the foundation of his beliefs. Your empire is vast, General, but it's built on a single way of thinking. Humanity? We contain multitudes. We can be warriors or diplomats, conquerors or collaborators. We can think in ways your empire has never imagined, adapt in ways your soldiers can't comprehend. That's not weakness, it's the ultimate strength. The arena was absolutely silent now, every being present transfixed by the confrontation. Not a battle of weapons or technology, but a battle of ideas. The final trial isn't about proving humanity's worth to your empire, Cooper declared. It's about your empire proving it's worthy of joining a larger universe. One where strength isn't just about power, but about understanding. About growth. About change. The general's armor slowly powered down, its shifting surfaces stilling. When he spoke, his voice was different, thoughtful, almost uncertain. You planned this from the beginning. Cooper nodded. From the moment you sent your message to Earth. You wanted to test our strength, but you never considered that we might be testing yours. Every trial, every challenge, was an opportunity, not to prove we could fight, but to prove we could change you. She turned to address the gathered aliens directly. Your empire stands at a crossroads. You can continue as you are, conquering and dominating, always searching for proof of your superiority. Or you can begin to understand that true power comes from comprehension, from the ability to see strength in different forms. The impact of her words rippled through the arena. Alien leaders who had served the Empire for centuries found themselves questioning assumptions they had never before examined. The general himself seemed to be wrestling with concepts that challenged the very foundation of his existence. The choice is yours, Cooper concluded. But know this, humanity won't be conquered, not because we're stronger in the way you understand strength, but because we represent something your empire needs to learn. We are not your enemies. We are not even your subjects. We are your teachers, if you're willing to understand. The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, the general did something unprecedented in the history of the Empire. He deactivated his armor completely, letting it fold away until he stood as vulnerable as Cooper. In all our conquests, he said, his voice carrying a new tone of revelation, no one has ever defeated us like this. Not with weapons, not with technology, but with understanding. Cooper's response was gentle but firm. Not defeat, General. Evolution. The impact of this moment would reshape the Empire forever. The final trial had indeed proven something about strength, just not in the way anyone had expected. It marked the beginning of a new era, not just for humanity in the alien empire, but for all species who would learn from this moment. As the twin sun set on the alien world, Cooper prepared for her return to Earth. She had come as humanity's champion and was leaving as something more, a symbol of a different kind of strength, a different way of thinking about power and victory. The general watched her departure with new eyes, understanding finally that the greatest conquests don't come through domination, but through comprehension. The Empire would never be the same, and perhaps that had been humanity's greatest victory all along. When Cooper's transport lifted off, carrying her back to Earth, she left behind more than a defeated enemy. She left a civilization beginning to question, to understand, to grow. The real victory wasn't in proving humanity's worth to the Empire, but in showing the Empire a new way to measure worth itself. Earth had sent its champion not to fight, but to teach. And in doing so, had achieved something far greater than victory, it had created understanding.